So today I want to talk about setting up a corporate safety culture. And this is something I'm very lucky that I get to talk about a lot. I'm the co-founder and chief pilot of Kittyhawk. We are a drone operations management platform. So I get to talk to hundreds of people about hundreds of different organizations and how they're managing, mitigating, and controlling risk amongst their fleet and team. So we don't really specialize in one particular vertical. We are horizontally focused. So I can pick up the phone, talk to a SWAT team, hang up the phone, pick it up again 10 minutes later and talk to somebody who's trying to film a series of endangered whales. And so it keeps things really interesting, and it also keeps the number of problems that I'm dealing with and number of problems that our customers are dealing with fresh and interesting for me, because if nothing else, I'm a problem solver, and I think that problem solving is a full contact sport. So you're going to leave here with some really, really kind of solid ideas for not just this fluffy corporate culture and do we have an HR manual for this. This is stuff that you can use today to make your organization safer and your drone programs arguably more and more successful. So why should you listen to me, right? Everybody comes up here and says, I'm an expert. I've been in drones for almost 3 years. That's great. I like that. So if you can fly it, I've probably flown it. If you can crash it, I've probably crashed it. I was doing this long before it was called drones. I've been flying SUAS for the last 15 years. I was a competitive model airplane pilot and a competitive helicopter pilot. I also flew a 15-foot chalupa blimp for the Phoenix Coyotes at halftime or intermission. And so there's a story there later. I'll get to it. But that was a good way to earn some money before all this commercial drone business showed up. So Kittyhawk unifies the mission, aircraft, and data to empower commercial drone operations. That's just a fancy way of we help people know what's going on with their team and help them keep them safe. So one of the things that we work with a lot is this idea that you have to have an operations guide. And when I talk about culture, it's not a piece of paper. It's not something that you can just go ahead and print up and say, we have a culture. A culture is really something that you have to build and work on. And I argue that a culture is the best freaking employee you're ever going to have. Because when you build a right culture, that culture is there working even when you're not. So one of the things that we take really seriously at Kittyhawk is everybody in the company has to know how to fly. There is nobody who works at Kittyhawk that can't operate a drone safely in the national airspace. This is paramount to what we do, because anybody can just drink the Kool-Aid and say, yeah, we believe in this, let's develop some software. I mean, everybody knows how to fly. And so part of that culture is, I'm the chief pilot, I've wrecked everything under the sun, but if I'm not there, how do I know people are making good decisions? Well, it's the culture that we've built. It was actually just the other day, we had, I don't even know if I should share this, but kind of on a hot streak, so why the hell not? We were in the park testing out some software. We have an event called Friday Fly Day. So every Friday we go test out the new builds. Nobody flies Kittyhawk before somebody from Kittyhawk has flown Kittyhawk. And we're standing there, and everyone's kind of working on this stuff. We got 4 or 5 birds in the air, and it's pretty exciting. And my big thing is I always say, look, you don't want to break a TFR. You don't want to break city rules. Otherwise, you're going to make a lot of new friends who talk into their sleeves and wear suits. This is kind of like my favorite thing to say. And all of a sudden, I'm standing there, and I'm kind of looking over at the new stuff that we're working on, and I see this guy, and he's got that look. He's got that, like, I'm a cop, and I'm coming to ruin your day look. I was like, uh-oh. All right, here we go. So I'm like, all right, everybody needs to land right now. And instead of chaos, what I heard was the team communicating to each other. Okay, I'm landing to the left. I'm 10 feet in the air. Okay, I'm going to land in front of us. I'm 20 feet in the air. Okay, I'm on the right, and I'm going to land here as soon as she's down. So this was interesting, right? It was, we need to act, but I didn't have to tell anybody what to do as the chief pilot. This was the culture coming out to play. This was the culture being at work. And so in doing this, everybody was able to operate safely. Now, what happened next is a little interesting. Apparently there is a city ordinance 1093-1 that we didn't know about. And though you can fly over the park legally, you can't fly from in the park legally. Needless to say, we did our best to explain ourselves. No, we're not spying on the children on the playground, officer. Yes, we understand. Yes, we're sorry. We managed to talk our way out of the tickets. But it was something that really impressed me. Just here's this really stressful situation, Everybody's worried about getting a ticket and bringing shame to the company. And instead, under pressure, culture came out to play. And so this is the kind of stuff I like to think about. I always like to say I live in the future. I'm just kind of stuck in the past. I didn't want to have to be there, but I'm constantly thinking about a team of people needing to operate together. And a culture is really the glue that keeps them together. So CNN is a prime example of this. They just got their flight over people waiver. They're a customer of ours, but most importantly, they have the most rigorous safety culture I've seen to date. Everything is spelled out. You can ask any of them, what do you do if, and they have an answer. But most importantly, if they don't have an answer, they're willing to find out, they're willing to ask, they're willing to say, I don't know. Nothing is more dangerous for a safety culture than know-it-alls. Oh yeah, just do this. Oh yeah, I do this, right? Those are the people that you need to worry about on your team. Because when there's a critical event and it's, wow, should we fly? Oh, you know what? This is what I do. Just go do this. Get it done, right? Those are the folks you have to worry about. A safety culture really starts in the idea that everybody's allowed to say, I don't know. Everybody's allowed to say, I'm not sure. Everybody's allowed to ask somebody else, what do we do here? So plan the work the plan, and then watch as the plan works. So some of the things that I like to include in this, though, are like, do you always have to fly with a VO? I prefer to do it. We tend to fly in really, really drastic areas for Friday Fly Day. Tops of buildings, all kinds of crazy stuff. All Class G airspace, all legal. We hold 107s, but they're definitely treacherous places where GPS could drop out. Who knows what's going to pop up from behind that building? Like, we have a lot of stuff that we need to pay attention to. So can you fly alone? What are the conditions under which you can fly alone? And so part of this is having the ability to have somebody speak up for you. I was flying with my buddy. We were flying from Arizona to California, Bakersfield. And he's an awesome dude, private pilot. He has an exemption because he's blind in one eye. He was like, just come with me just in case there's a problem. You can fly. So okay, no problem. So we're over the middle of the desert, and I'm looking at the GPS, and there's this like airspace we're getting closer to. I'm like, hey Bernie, I think let's just pop around this stuff. It's an MOA. I don't know. He's like, no, dude, we're on flight following. They'll let us know. I'm like, no, I think let's. So okay. So 10 minutes later, like we're right up on. I said, it's like 2 seconds. Let's just go around. No. They've had plenty of time. They'd let us know. So we enter into this MOA, and not 2 minutes later, I hear 49er Sierra, immediate left turn. This is AirWorks. They are pissed. I mean, consummately. And, rightfully so. So we kind of exit the airspace, and they gave us a number to call. And, 2.5 hours of I told you so just wasn't quite enough. But we were going to a model airplane contest. So the next morning, I'm sitting there. All of a sudden, I hear like, boom! It like shook my teeth. I said, what the hell was that? They're like, oh, that's the space shuttle landing at Edwards. I was like, they didn't have an MOA out that they were blocking for that, did they? Oh, yeah, all the time. So I can understand why they were upset. Not the greatest situation, but the key is I was his visual observer. Though he did not listen to me, the safety culture was trying to work. It just wasn't working very effectively. And then I think the other important part about this safety stuff is everyone needs to have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to fly. That's it. This is not for me. This is not the right conditions. What are the immediate scrubs, right? If you're in show business and there's a producer who's just kind of a jerk, like, you're going to do this shot and here's how it's going to be. You need to have your teams back and say, you know what? Nobody's allowed to tell you that. The buck stops with you. You're the 107. You're in charge. And when you empower people to make those decisions and just say, boop, sorry, dude, you're done, that gives a lot of credence to what I would call a traditional safety culture. And so that, brings us to the last part. Who is an immediate scrub? And if there's somebody there that you know is going to be a monster, maybe it's just not the right gig for you. Maybe it's not the right gig for the team. Maybe it's something to reconsider. Or maybe it's time to send somebody who's a real hardhead, like myself. Because I have no problem telling people to pound sand. So outside of all of that kind of operational consideration, we have the ability to say, like, are there minimums? Should you be current? I mean, how deep do we want to get into this? And I think when it comes to, the smaller stuff, the Sparks and Mavics of the world, maybe not. But boy, when I look at the price tag of that 210 and the stuff it carries and potentially the things it's flying near, boy, might it be nice to have some minimums for recency and currency? If there's COAs that you have, a lot of public safety people have COAs. I know a lot of our customers, so cops are our favorite customers. And I didn't just say that to get out of a ticket. I really meant it. They're our favorite customers because they're all on the same team. There's no competitive advantage for them to say like, oh yeah, we use this Kittyhawk thing, but don't tell anybody else. No, they're all like, yeah, we use this thing and it works. And so they all share this knowledge with each other because the public is really their customer. They all have stringent reporting requirements for their COAs. Having somebody in charge of this means that everybody's going to be looking at people's data and their flights. And so you have somebody who's in charge of this. And having a single go-to person really is going to help you say, all right, this is the way we're going to handle this. Collaboration is not an accident. Everyone knowing what the plan looks like ensures that everybody knows what success looks like. And I know this sounds like something you'd see on a poster with like a big sunset and like a unicorn flying through it in a guidance counselor's office, but understanding that this is what success looks like and this is the plan really helps everybody visualize that, even if it's in kind of this abstract way. So yeah, we have small stuff, and yeah, you don't need to register your less than 250 pound or 250 gram drone, but when you're flying stuff that's 20, 30, 40, even 55 pounds, you got to have big plans. Because if that aircraft gets somewhere that you were not 5 minutes before, you've got a real problem on your hands. So how do you decide, right? You have all these operations, all these standards, all this culture that you've been working so hard on. How do you decide what risk is and how you're going to manage it? So working on a risk assessment where you're going to say, it's not just the aircraft. Well, I'm flying a quadcopter and it only has one mode of failure, and oh boy, these batteries are a little old. That's not just part of the risk. How do you feel today? You have a headache? Are you rushed while you're doing your pre-flight? Was someone giving you a hard time? Is there distractions about? Is somebody coming up behind you and saying, how high does it go? How fast does it go? Can I try next? Because those are the 3 questions everybody asks a drone operator. Yeah, some of you know. And then maybe, there's weather conditions that are tough. Cold weather, right? Bad for those batteries. Bad for that iPad. Bad for that cellular phone. Or maybe hot weather. Thermal shutdowns. Maybe batteries overtemping. Maybe motors overtemping. There's a lot of different ways that risk kind of insidiously moves into our operations. It's not, man, I'm a great stick, I can go fly this thing anywhere I want. Risk is about, man, I need an Advil right now, I really don't feel good. I probably shouldn't be flying. And so that has nothing to do with the aircraft. That risk came from maybe the night before I didn't get enough sleep, or that risk came from I'm tired of listening to my manager yell at me because I haven't gotten the shot yet. So there's different ways that this looks, and being able to manage it at scale is a difficult thing to do. So having a risk assessment where you can say, cool, I'm going to go through all these different things. At the end of it, if I'm above 42%, or whatever it is you want to deem too risky, I'm going to call and get approval, or I'm going to make sure that I mitigate the part that is making this 42%. And then lastly, if you're in the public sector, there's a lot of self-insurance going on. And if you're in the sort of large company sector, there's a lot of self-insurance going on. But carry insurance, because when it comes down to it, it's not if but when. I always like to say that you have to love the skill and not the tool, and I adopted that phrase after I mercilessly drove hundreds of aircraft into the ground and all I was left was really expensive toothpicks. So love the skill, not the tool, but understand that they all have this little invisible expiration date written on them, and whether it's an equipment failure or a falcon that you didn't see coming, or man, balloons, I don't know why, but I am suddenly so much more cognizant to balloons floating around now that we're flying so much. They're everywhere. The environments aside, they're awful for commercial drone operations, so keep an eye out for those too. So scaling a process is about repeatability, and it's about making sure that it's the same every time. When you run that risk assessment, it's the same risk assessment. When you run that checklist, it's the same checklist. And if you're going to measure people against each other, which can hurt and help a safety culture, depends on how you implement it, you need to make sure everybody's running that same checklist. Everybody's running that same risk assessment, because if the risk assessment I'm running has me at a 48% all the time, and Joe down the hall's at 41, and he's going to be getting a way better score than me, that's trash. That's going to make me hate the safety culture. So we really need to make sure that when you scale the process, it's repeatable. And the nerds call it idempotency. I think it's a dumb name, but I just felt like it was worth mentioning because there's a lot of stupid names for stuff like this. Stick with the basics, belt and suspenders, keep it simple. That way everybody understands what's going on. Obviously, make sure you have a pre-flight checklist, and then make sure that people use the pre-flight checklist. You can walk by, 10 people walk by you out a door, and you hand each one of them a pre-flight checklist. That's fantastic. How many of them ran it? Do you know if they ran it? Do you know what notes they made about them? It's important to have a system that's going to help you do this. If you are interested, we don't think that information is something that you should ever charge for. Kittyhawk has a library of user-generated checklists. It is free, it costs nothing, and if you have an awesome checklist that you want to share with the world, feel free. We're happy to have it. I personally typed in like the first 50 checklists by hand because I thought it was important to start to have a library. Now there's hundreds of them. They're for different aircraft type, different weather types, every kind of corner case you can imagine. They're great starting points. Steal them, use them, make use of them, put them into your safety culture because I know they are helping hundreds of others people's safety culture. So I'm a big fan of having the information there available for you. But if you don't, there are 3 things that you can remember that will get you through most situations. So loose, juice, and roost. All right? So loose, literally. Pick the thing up. Is anything loose? Is everything secured to the aircraft? Is your transmitter secure? Is your phone secure in your transmitter? Is anything loose? The props on right, the props on tight. Loose. Juice. Do we have enough juice? Do we have enough electricity? Is the battery in the drone charged? Battery in my phone charged? Battery in my transmitter charged? Do we have enough juice? And then, if there is a problem, and this thing decides to return to home, where is it coming home to roost? Let's make sure we have that set correctly and that we have our settings set correctly. So this kind of brings me to my blimp story about when you do a pre-flight and you run a pre-flight checklist, you need to make sure that it's you running that pre-flight checklist and you understand the craft and consequences of which you are running that pre-flight checklist. So this is me almost 30 pounds ago, and this was a picture that we took. So I would go, and I had a handler, all right, because they didn't trust me to just be in charge of this thing. So the handler brought me in. He goes, listen, I got to tell you, I talked to Mr. Bell, or whoever was the owner of all these Taco Bells in the Southwest that bought this thing. He's like, it looks a little not inflated enough. Now, I had already done my pre-flight check. I'd done the weight and balance. The thing was flying perfectly. And so I went up to watch the game because one of the advantages of flying this gig was you got season tickets to the Phoenix Coyotes. I didn't even like hockey. I just thought it was cool. And so I was up there, and I come back down, I drag the blimp out into the stadium, I start flying it. And at the middle and the bottom there are coupons for free chalupas. Which also, in addition to the money that they paid me, I was embezzling the coupons by which to live. It was fantastic. And so the key was you'd want to fly pretty low, get all the kids chasing you, make them think you're going to drop the coupons, and then fly away. This was kind of the joy of the job. And as I'm starting to do that, I go to my buddy, I said, Alex, something's not right here. And so I'm kind of like adding down thrust, till finally I'm full down thrust. So you have to imagine, it's a pretty quiet stadium, and all you hear is these 2 really angry hair dryers on the side of this thing. Woo! Just absolutely trying to get it down. And it still continues to keep going up. So it's 38 degrees, it's an ice hockey stadium, and it keeps going up. And I'm starting to pour sweat because I'm noticing that at the top of the stadium, there are really, really hot halogen lights. And so this is not what you would consider a toy. This is 18, 19 pounds. I mean, consider, 2 210s falling on you. Not a good idea, particularly when this thing attracts a bunch of children to be under it. And so finally it's getting really close to the lights, and I'm getting ready to tell Alex, go tell him to evacuate that part of the stadium so that when this thing plummets, it doesn't hit little Timmy. And finally, with some good luck, it catches this weird downdraft. And hair dryers are screaming, and it starts coming down. I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. We got something good. So, in aviation, there's a good philosophy. If it's working, don't change it. So I just let it go. And it's coming down, and it's in this real good sinker. Finally, goes right down to the middle of center ice. And so I have to walk out there in my sneakers and pull this thing home like a bad freaking dog. Meanwhile, the hockey fans are literally yelling, "Hey, Blimp boy, good landing!" So I walk back out there, go through the tunnel. The players now go on because we've delayed them for 5 or 10 minutes. And I go to the guys, "Did you touch my blimp by chance?" He goes, "Yeah, I put some more helium in it because I told you it looked a little soft." I said, well, I said a lot of things. The most important one was that I quit. He goes, "Well, I thought you did great. You flew it right by Taco Bell Boy's box up there." And I said, well, it was not for his benefit. So, and that was that. I left with my pockets full of chalupa coupons, though. Do not be misled. They paid. So, weather. This is obviously a concern, but you really have to consider these things when you're talking about operations. So I've touched on extreme hot, extreme cold. I want to go over one more safety story with you because we're running out of time. We were on top of, we're on the 11th story of this building, and we're flying a new drone. Unimportant which one it was. And my co-founder's flying it, and he's never flew drones before he met me, but he's gotten really good on this. He's really picked it up. And we're up there, and it's blowing. I mean, it's got to be blowing 20 knots. And so this thing's doing this into the wind, right? It's no problem, locked in, good GPS signal. But we're in the middle of all these buildings. And all of a sudden, I hear out of his radio, attitude mode. I go, "Oh, John, you're in attitude mode. You good?" He goes, "I don't know. What? I don't know what attitude mode is. Wait a minute. It's not telling me. It's not." And panic sets in. And this thing starts sailing downwind. I mean, 20 knots plus downwind. And it's small. So by the time I get that transmitter from him, I am, whoa, hold on. Luckily, I was looking at it and I knew which way it was pointing, but it took almost over 3 minutes for this thing to get back upwind. We made it back, we landed it, no problem. But when you're dealing with high winds and you're going down, when you're coming back upwind, you need to consider, if you go into attitude mode or you have to do maneuvers that you didn't plan for, this is all part of having a safety culture. So maybe a weather event necessitates a visual orientation. We took this thing back, it was fine, it worked, hasn't done it since, but it was an interesting exercise, and you should know the failure modes of your aircraft. Because if you don't, you're going to learn about them at the worst possible time in the worst possible situation. So being able to fly in attitude mode or to fly in what I would call diminished capabilities is super important to making sure your team is going to be able to do their job. Because really, we're getting to a level of sophistication today, luckily, that the operator is less and less and less in the feedback loop. But when they do need to be in the feedback loop, the consequences are ever higher. So making sure you understand those modes and how to deal with them is going to be paramount to making sure you have a successful safety program. Environment, I'll go through this real quick. Drafts between buildings, if you fly in cities a lot, you know this is a huge deal. I talked to some folks that were doing a car commercial. The car had to go down this city block, and they were getting these great shots, and all of a sudden, because they were flying in attitude mode, obviously, all of a sudden, they get down this one city block, and the thing just, whoop, gone. It was real windy. So they were able to figure it out. They used the on-screen video, but they had to do a serious brief. At the end of that is, how did this happen? And it's because there are drafts between buildings that they were not accounting for. Likewise, bystanders, ridge lift, icing. I mean, there's icing. Icing's a real thing. Drones, real aircraft, it exists. So make sure you understand how that's going to affect your aircraft. I've already touched on failure modes. Telemetry is your friend. Telemetry is your friend in the sense that if you work in maybe the public sector, you're going to be able to prove exactly what it was your team was doing. No, Mrs. Johnson, we were not spying on Mittens the cat. We understand that she likes to look out the window, but we don't want to look at her, right? Being able to say we were pointing this direction at this altitude, we took these pictures, and all of this is available to you is going to be critical to making sure you have not only compliance, but what I call CYA compliance. So make sure you have the ability to, in retrospect, say, no, we were not messing with Mittens. Keep everything centralized, and most importantly, audit it, right? This is kind of the notion of Kaizen, right? That which gets paid attention to gets improved. If you don't audit this stuff, you have this big, fat repository of data that could come back and bite you. You need to audit it, make sure that the information is correct, and that if there are problems with compliance or safety, you address them, mitigate them, and upstream that information back to your team. This is the most important part of the safety culture, is making sure that all of this is being addressed. So I think drones provide us with an opportunity to improve hundreds, if not thousands, of laborious and dangerous workflows. But we need to apply the same pragmatism and process that we do to other parts of the corporate operation. This is not a new exercise. There have been new tools coming into the corporation for millennia, and yet we're still able to manage all of them. Drones are no different, and with the right culture, the right process, and the right products backing those processes, you're going to be able to handle this.